Hi, my name is Nathaniel Sagman, and I'm a volunteer with the Pasadena for Rent Control and Just Cause Evictions campaign.
So, how did you hear about our rent control campaign?
So I joined the Tenants Union in early 2019, and at that point, actually, there was zero. For in Pasadena, there were zero rent controls, rent stabilization, or just cause eviction protections. And at that stage, some members of the Pasadena Tenants Union were actually writing the charter amendment that's now on the ballot in November. And in October 2019, I started working on our solidarity hotline, and it just became, even before working on that, it was just apparent through my work with the Tenants Union how much Pasadena needed some sort of protection for tenants.
Why is rent control not only important to you, but to the community as a whole?
I like to be engaged with my community. I think that's what's important. And under current laws, a huge amount of tenants in Pasadena can be evicted for no reason at any time, or they can receive an exorbitant rent increase, which goes way beyond inflation. And the result of this is that we're seeing families and long-term community members being forced out of their homes. And as well, like fundamentally, the laws are so skewed toward property owners that tenants that I've worked with are just hesitant and just don't want to assert their rights with their landlords, or demand things like habitability requirements when there are issues in their homes, and because out of fear of retaliation. There's really no recourse in a lot of situations, and this bill has a lot of provisions in here that would really shift that power balance and ultimately let people take control of their own homes.
What's your background as a tenant or a homeowner or a landlord?
I'm just a tenant. I started in Caltech housing for 1 year, and then I moved into a home with I live with 7 people right now, so it keeps our rent down.
Wow.
Yeah, we're all working. But yeah, so I'm just a tenant in Pasadena. Our place is kind of okay on rent because we've got so many, but if you want a double or a single in Pasadena, that's fairly difficult.
Describe a few more stories, if you will, of people that have been priced out or at risk of being priced out. You were telling me earlier that in one day today, you received 4 emergency calls on the Pasadena Tenants Union hotline.
It's called the Tenant Solidarity Hotline, and how it's set up is tenants call with any issue they have at all. And this is typically like rent increases or a no-fault eviction, being an eviction where you've done nothing wrong, or some habitability issue, or this can range to like landlord harassment, threat and violence from the landlord, or an illegal lockout. And we're not lawyers, we have no legal training, but we just try and help however we can. And sometimes that does lead to setting people up with lawyers and walking them through the process. Oftentimes that's just informing people of their rights and helping them communicate with the landlord and assert their rights. It's not a service organization. The goal is to empower and educate other tenants and then bring them into the union so they can then contribute and help others in the community. Like when we have collective knowledge, we're sort of stronger.
What if they can't afford a lawyer? Then what happens?
One of our tenants union members met someone from the Eviction Defense Network, which is a local nonprofit. Essentially, we work closely with attorneys through this Eviction Defense Network. They represent a lot of people pro bono, and a lot of things were set up during the pandemic. So there's a website called stayhousedla.com, or maybe .org. Essentially, people. This was all set up during the pandemic to address a need. So people go on there, and there's a button, you hit Get Legal Help, you put in all your information, and they try and pair you to a lawyer. But the capacity just isn't there, like at all. So oftentimes, they're really doing the best they can. Sorry, I should say if someone meets the income requirements, they get paired with a lawyer.
So what is that income requirement?
I'd have to look it up, but it's some low income requirement.
Yeah.
So for example, these days they're at such low capacity that they only help people if you've actually received court documents, like an eviction and a summons that you have to respond to. That's the point where they start helping you. But now they don't even have the capacity to help people at this point. There are some tools put up by some organizations that help people file and answer with the court electronically. It's not a great situation right now.
So would you say things are getting worse? And this is before the COVID restriction requirements end.
Yeah, things have been getting. I mean, things were really terrible at the beginning of the pandemic, but we also had some really strong protections for tenants. But since then, all these restrictions are sort of slowly being lifted or tinkered in various ways, and quite a lot of people are being evicted. And so there's protections on the city level, Pasadena, the county level, and the state level. And the Pasadena protections are actually expiring tomorrow. And the county protections are set to expire at the end of December. And they don't even cover all tenants anymore. And also, as of yesterday, the board of directors had a meeting, and Catherine Barger is requesting a report on possibly ending these protections early. And we get so many calls with landlords trying to give no-fault evictions, which aren't allowed right now. And when these restrictions are lifted, it's sort of terrifying. The people, it's just so many people that will be removed. Our rent control measure will actually, when it passes and kicks in, it will actually cover these units, most of them. So we really need this. Yeah.
There's a lot of people this will involve. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of blurry to me. There's just so many cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, your hotline may just, the volume may just go up exponentially.
Right. So, and at the end of 2019, something called the Tenant Protection Act was passed, which then went into effect on January 1st, 2020. And that gives no-fault eviction protections for like multifamily residential units, so basically apartment buildings, but not single-family homes. So they have zero protections, and that's extremely concerning.
So, do you have a sense of what landlords who evict tenants then do?
Some of them do this to raise the rent. If they're in these multifamily residential units, they can't be evicted for no reason, but there are these just cause reasons. And I don't want to get into any details, but there's like a lot of loopholes in this law. And our bill closes those loopholes. But so in California, we also don't have vacancy control. It's not allowed by something called Costa-Hawkins Act. And so this means for these apartment buildings, how much one can raise the rent is constrained by the Tenant Protection Act, but when no one's in the unit, one can raise it as much as they like. So landlords are very strongly incentivized to evict and then raise the rent in that way.
Wow, you paint a very bleak picture of the situation that's going to only get worse if we don't pass the rent control initiative. How do you think people should get involved?
Right now, we're just at the stage of so there's a signature gathering campaign to get the amendment on the ballot, and right now we're just distributing flyers to get people educated and involved, and soon we're going to start actually door knocking for votes. So you can just go to our website, which is pasadena4rentcontrol.org, and this is one of the, a really direct way to get involved and engaged with your community. And definitely donate to the campaign, because the opposition is coming in with millions of dollars in counter advertising.
Well, thank you very much, Nathaniel. That was very enlightening.
Great. Thanks so much.
Sure.